Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a submission by one of our scholarship students, Angie, in Australia. This is her horse, Dante. Now, Dante, it seems, had a little back or hind leg injury a couple of years ago that he's recovering from, so she is rehabbing him from that and working him on the lunge for that reason. So what I see here, it doesn't really look too bad here. He looks pretty good. She's having him step over these poles, I'm sure, just to get him a little more active behind. As you can see how it just makes him lift up that hind leg a little bit. The biggest thing here, as with a horse like this, is you want to keep working towards a more swinging walk. As you can see, his walk behind is a little stifled. It kind of almost looks like he's pulling his feet out of the mud, so to speak, a little bit. So we'd like to see him take a much more active and longer swing in the step, which is what she's trying to do there, and get him to stretch down a little deeper as he does right there. And that looks a lot better. And once again, you can see how just going over that little pole adds such a little bit of difference to his step. He has to work a little harder. And I think going over single poles on the ground, I do this very often with my horses. I usually will just use one pole rather than a whole group of them around the ring, as it can be difficult to get horses to stay on a circle and going over many poles at the same time. So I suggest maybe just one pole, and then you don't have to walk him out so far. What I'd like to see you keeping on a little more steady contact with the rein there at times, and just continuing to urge him. Now that was better that time, continuing to urge him on into a bigger step. And even if he does break into a trot, that's very normal. The walk is looking better here. I like how he's stepping here. Let's see how he goes over this pole. That was better, had a better rhythm to the step that time. He didn't jerk back. So that's what we're looking for. When we work over any kind of ground poles or cavaletti, which are all great for horses, but they're great for horses only if they're working over their back. So that's the biggest thing, like everything else. People will often say to me, well, I'm taking my horse out to walk up and down hills and to build up his behind. And that's kind of a wrong idea in the sense that, anything the horse does that it's not working over the top line is going to basically be detrimental to him in the long run. So if you're going to go out and do hill work and that sort of thing, start gradually and be sure you can keep the horse working over its back and swinging a nice active trot, or excuse me, a nice active walk, so that it keeps a rhythm over these things and maintains the engagement through his back. So take the hill work and cavaletti work and all that stuff. Do it by all means, but be sure that you're doing it at a level that's good for the horse. If you're starting over poles, just start over one pole on the ground. Get the horse even and steady over one pole on the ground before you try to put multiple poles in the ground. Be sure the horse can stay steady in the bridle or stretching into the contact. So in other words, so that it stays over its back while you're doing those things. And the same thing applies to going over jumps, up and down hills, no matter what it is. So if you're asking something, if you can get your horse working over its back, and you suddenly start doing some big fences or big hills, this kind of thing, you may find the horse may not be strong enough to do it at that level. So always back down. Once again, always start at the bottom and work your way up. And don't be in a hurry. Very many people I see jumping, for instance, are in a big hurry to get over bigger fences, and that's really not what you should do. In fact, just poles on the ground are a wonderful way to school horses' distances without having to wear their legs out going over 100 jumps while you're doing it. So you've got to remember that every time you go over a jump, you are asking the horse to do something that's going to put a lot of pressure on its body, and especially on those small bones inside its feet. So we don't want to do a whole lot of that. That's why we're seeing these days, we're seeing very few horses that make it out of the upper levels and work their way back down again, because they're usually so completely fried out physically, that is, their joints have all been so destroyed that they really don't have a chance of succeeding as a lower level horse for someone, as they go into their retirement. And it used to be very common that horses would be, we'd see them go up the levels, and then we'd see them for years later, at lower levels with students. And that is something that we're starting not to see so much, because, as I said, the veterinarians have come up with a lot of injections they can give horses to keep them going and to lubricate their joints. But the problem with that is every time you inject a horse's joints and you haven't corrected the problem that's causing the joint problem, the joint is just going to be worse next time. It's going to take more injections. They will start coming sooner and sooner in between the injections. And eventually the horse's joints will just be so worn out that that the horse simply cannot do anything for the rest of its life. And that's a very sad thing. So really take your time with all of these things. We really want to have a horse, it takes 2 to 4 years just to get a horse steady and going for you. So don't wear them out before you get there, is sort of the point I'm trying to say here. Now she's got him in a trot, and this is looking pretty good. I'd like to see her paying more attention to keeping more in the center of the poles. That's why were it I would just work with one pole, so you're not trying to lead him to so many, to make it easier for you and just to get him more consistently going. So you have, 3/4 of the circle to get him right again and moving before you go over the pole here. Because as you see now, he's starting to evade the pole by going to the outside, and that's never, you never want to teach a horse to evade obstacles, especially if you're going to jump them down the road. So be sure you can get him to the middle of the pole each time. It's not a bad idea also to put wings on those poles. In other words, a guide pole to the center so the horse, can't run out, so to speak. This trot is looking pretty good. It's still very, very short. Once again, he misses the pole there, so I don't know if you're doing that on purpose, but don't if you are, because it's a great way to teach a horse to start, if you were trying to jump the horse, to avoid what you're doing. The same thing here. He's getting way too far out to the end of the poles. So I would suggest just going back to one pole alone and being sure you can get the horse in the center of that pole each time that you do it. Now she's changing directions here. Once again, same thing, he's too far. Now that was a little better. That's a little better over the middle of the pole. But he still was drifting to the outside. So once again, your goal is to get him to the middle of that pole each time so he doesn't learn to miss the poles himself, so to speak. And once again, I'd like to see this walk just get a little more active. It's a little too slow. So what I'd like to see you get closer to the horse with your lunge line so that you're walking with him a little more. And we just want to keep a more active, steady pace. Once again there, you've got too much slack in the line. He's coming to the side of the pole. So you've got to really keep that slack out of the line. Once again, now he avoids a pole again. So this is really not good at all from that point of view, that you're really teaching the horse to avoid and sort of go wherever he wants to go. So you've got to get that range shortened up, walk with the horse a little more, get him more active. This is still not an active enough trot. He's just kind of barely moving behind. His hind legs are kind of out behind him there a little bit. So you really need to start by just getting him a little more active. Once again, keeping the slack out of the line. You got to the middle of it that time, but he could have easily avoided it had he wanted to, because you wouldn't have been able to do anything about it because you have so much slack in the line. So once again, here he almost avoids it and therefore becomes very irregular over the pole. So we want everything to be steady, like a metronome. You want to work the horse like a metronome. So you start off in your lunge without any poles, just do a single pole, get the horse really moving and active, and then add a single pole. And keep your contact and keep that slack out of the rein so he can't avoid it. Once again, this is just not rhythmic enough for this to be of any value for the horse. You're letting him come up and he's slowing down, almost stopping in front of the poles sometimes. Got to have a much more steady rhythm for this to have any real value for the horse. Once again, same thing here. He's just simply not moving actively enough. So while I know you're rehabbing him, perhaps you don't want to ask him to do too much, but I would ask him to do a little more than what you're doing here, because he's really just kind of dragging himself along. So we need a much more active walk, much more active trot. Once again, keeping the slack out of the line. That one was a little better. Got over the center of that one that time, but still, once again, you've got a lot of slack in the line. Still could use a more active trot. And that time he came up a little irregular because you don't have enough forward movement. So he came up and kind of slowed down before he went over the pole to make it easier for himself. Here he evades the pole again. Once again, this is very, very bad for the horse. We don't want to teach him to evade obstacles. So you want to get one pole, use your other pole to put a wing on the inside so that you have a guide pole, or even two guide poles if you need them on either side. So you have like a chute that you're creating to send the horse down. Once again, here he evades the pole again. So if you started jumping a horse after doing this, and if you were starting a young horse and you started to go over the jumps, well, if you start going down to jumps, he's going to think he can do the same thing. Once again, much too inactive, misses the pole again. Now we've changed directions again. Walk is a little better there, because he's stretching into the contact better. Good, and over the center of the pole that time. That's good. And I see here your line is a little better, but you still want to keep that slack out of it. But I like how his walk is starting to swing a little better here. Better that time. At least he stretched down in front of it. Didn't stop quite so much. You just want to get a more active walk. And the way you do that is just by getting closer to him. Keep the slack out of the line. Just like when you ride, we don't want to have a backwards tension on the line, but we also don't want to have a completely loose rein either. That allows the horse to go wherever it wants to go. A little better there, coming to the center, but still, once again, we need to get that slack out of the rein so you can keep a more consistent contact. But it still just needs to be more active. You've just got to get him more active in the trot and get him to swing and get moving a little more actively. And you could kind of see there as he came out. I'd like to see you trying to keep a much steadier, rounder circle. Sometimes you seem to get a little bit out ahead of his eye, so you want to be behind him a little bit. I'd like to see you point the whip more at him, so that you are at the top of a triangle formed by the rein and by your whip. And see here now he is cantering now, and once again evading the pull. Now, once again, I'm not sure whether you're doing that on purpose or not, but that's just not a very good practice in terms of the ultimate training of the horse. And here he evades the pull to the inside. So once again, you've just got to get your line a lot shorter, walk with him a little more so you can make him a little more active and keep sending him more actively forward from the whip. Once again, comes back to a walk, but he evades the pull. So this is not a bad idea for him, but once again, now you're letting him look to the outside, which we don't want to do. You want to keep him bending on the circle all the time, but once again, you have no contact. There's a big loop in your rein, and that is not good. We want to keep that slack out of the rein, so he can't just suddenly decide to throw his head to the outside like he did there. He might try, but if you don't have all that slack in the rein, he's not going to be able to do it. And what you would want to do as soon as he does that is just to send him on more actively forward. Once again, so we send him forward into the contact with the rein. Good, so I'm going to wind this up here today. This has been Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I'm going to let this tape play on out to the end so you can see what she does. But Angie, the biggest thing I need you to do now is, once again, get shorter with the rein. Okay, now you've changed to doing them on a little bit of a circle. Okay, it looks to me like your spacing is not correct between those. You've got a few in a row. The distance for a horse of this size should be about 4.5 feet between those. Now maybe you have that, but it doesn't look like to me. And once again, you let him run around the second set of poles. So I would do away with the extra poles. Just have whatever you're going over, one set of whatever you're going over, so that you can work to get him right. And once again, you can see he's stepping on these poles because you just simply have the wrong distance. They should be 4.5 feet apart. And that will work for both the walking and the trotting work. But he's coming up here and almost stepping on the poles. That's just really not good. And same thing here. You've got too many too close together, so you can't keep a consistent rhythm. So that's really what I want you to do. And even before you go over the poles, you should get him in a much more consistent rhythm before you even try to go over the poles. But the way you've set these up, he's having to jerk to the left in order to make that second set of poles over there. This is just a very bad idea what you're doing here. So once again, just eliminate the second set and just have one set of things that you're going over so he's not getting interrupted. So you have the rest of the stride around the circle in order to correct him. And once again, same here, much too loose a rein, much too slow a walk. You've got to get him much more swinging and active. Remember that anything that interrupts the horse's stride and causes him to lose rhythm basically causes you to waste time, because remember, the way that we evaluate how correct a gymnastic is for the horse is whether it maintains the rhythm or not. So if the horse comes up as you're seeing him do over these poles and he completely loses rhythm, it should be telling you that essentially, he's losing the gymnastic quality of that exercise because he's losing the rhythm. If he keeps the same rhythm, we know that the horse is maintaining that position over the back, though that was a nice stretch over that one. At least he's getting a little stretchier here. But once again, there's just not any consistency to any of this. It's slow, fast, pull to the outside. Now this trot is looking a little better there, but once again, I would just have one of those. Now he did that, fairly well, but once again, it looks to me like they're too close together. A little better there, but still not quite enough swing in his back and much too short a stride. So actually, I'd love to see another tape of you doing the same exercise. I only want one set of poles, whether it's a single pole or 3 in a row that you're working with. And the rest of it just a circle, keeping him consistent and more active. So let's do this exercise again to be a good exercise to see if we can improve it. Now the trot is looking a little better. That's certainly better than what you started with a little bit, but still it's not quite swinging and active enough to really do him much good. With this horse, I'm seeing he still has a his belly looks very distended, which tells me that he's not really pulling up through his core, which is what we'd like to see. He's dropped. I'm not seeing a line form along the edge of his ribs there the way I would like to see it if it tells me he's bringing his back up. So that will only happen if you're going to get him more active. So see you next time. Improve that.